morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from around the world. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Yetmir Yashari, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Is AI still under control? What ISO IEC 42001 and ISO IEC 2701 reveal? It is a pleasure to explore this very timely topic together, and an even greater pleasure to welcome our speaker, Ms. Nathalie Claes. And before we get started, I'd like to just quickly inform the audience that this session will be recorded and will be posted on our website and YouTube channel, along with the slides of the presentation, and an attestation of webinar completion worth 1 CBD credit will be issued within a week to all attendees who participate in at least 60% of this live session. Furthermore, we encourage you to engage throughout by submitting your questions using the Q&A feature in the questions box or the chat box, and we will address as many as we can during the Q&A session. Now, without further ado, let's get started. I'm going to hand it over to our speaker, Nathalie.
Thank you, Yetmir. Welcome, everybody. I'll quickly introduce myself. My name is Nathalie Claes. I'm living in Belgium, where it's pretty cold at the moment, at middle of winter time. I'm very happy to be hosting this webinar, which is, I'm assuming, the last webinar before we can all enjoy a well-deserved Christmas time and hopefully a nice Christmas holiday. We will dive a little bit deeper into the world of artificial intelligence and how ISO 42001 and ISO 27001 can help us in that journey in getting artificial intelligence under control. Because let's face it, artificial intelligence is pretty widespread in organizations, but having it under control is a completely different thing. So let me walk you quickly through the agenda, what we'll be talking about, and I'll try to keep it until 40-45 minutes so that we still have some time left to answer some of your questions. And the questions that we haven't answered, like you're used to from PECB, we will answer them separately, and they will be published separately as well. So during the webinar, we will talk about the fact like why AI control is now suddenly a board level issue. Why is it something that not only the IT folks need to talk about, but why does management need to get involved? We will dive a little bit deeper into the shortcomings of traditional security and compliance efforts. We'll have a look at how ISO 42001 and ISO 27001 can help us. And then we will look at what are auditors looking at and how can we help auditors, but also regulators in achieving certification towards, for example, ISO 42001 and ISO 27001. As I stated at the question around artificial intelligence, you can't open a newspaper, you can't open your LinkedIn or Facebook, and you can see artificial intelligence all over the place. Moreover, we see that a lot of management teams, a lot of CEOs, and it's already happening for quite a while now. Everybody wants to jump on the artificial intelligence train, not necessarily because it brings added value, but just because it's kind of sexy to have it on your website and to showcase it that you are doing something with artificial intelligence. The downside of the whole artificial intelligence, and I don't want to call it a bubble because I know in a lot of publications you see now that there is a lot of rumor and that investments in artificial intelligence, they're putting a lot of money in the artificial intelligence area, but the return on investment is still a little bit lacking. I don't want to call it a bubble like we had in the 2000s, where we also thought that the internet would stop working. But we see that there is a lot of change happening. We see that a lot of companies are starting to adopt artificial intelligence and start to develop artificial intelligence features or components or systems. But we see on the other hand as well that a lot of people in the organization want to buy that artificial intelligence tools to ensure that the efficiency increases in the organization. But on the other hand, we see that all the governance practices don't really keep up with the pace that artificial intelligence is nowadays going. We see that compliance teams, and we have a lot of things that we need to do, and we have NIS2, we have a lot of other legislations out there. We see a lot of things happening in the organization, and the compliance and governance teams are just not always capable in really handling that AI adoption. Not only because they're short-staffed or they don't have enough time, but also because they sometimes just lack the skills to really understand what is necessary to really govern in a good way an introduction or an adoption of artificial intelligence. Moreover, we see, because of a lot of those AI tools, and all of you probably know that, is that you can almost buy everything for free for the first week, 2 weeks, or a month. You can try a lot of tools, which also leads to the fact that a lot of those tools don't necessarily pass through compliance teams, security teams, IT teams to check what if the AI systems that you're trying to use, if the AI tools that you're trying to use, that they're in line with the security requirements, the compliance requirements in the organization. That also leads to the fact that a couple of years ago, we spoke about shadow IT, and basically we now can talk about shadow AI, because a lot of tools have AI features embedded in the tools that we already have, and a lot of people are just not aware of the fact what is out there, especially when you're in a big organization and a multinational. It's pretty tough for compliance teams to really understand what are the different AI tools that are in production in the organization, which also leads to an increasing risk towards those organizations, because you don't know what's happening in those AI tools. And then lastly, of course, I've already briefly touched upon it, regulators are catching up fast. We had, by coincidence, yesterday I was talking to a customer about it. We had the GDPR legislation, and then it kind of stayed quiet, or it seemed that it stayed quiet for quite a long time. And then we see now that regulators are really catching up. And we had NIS2 regulation in Europe, where there is a bigger focus on cybersecurity, cyber resilience. We also have the Cyber Resilience Act, but we also have the EU AI Act, which is putting a lot of requirements upon companies that are both developing, deploying, and using artificial intelligence systems. And all those things together lead to the fact that it's no longer a discussion that's only need to be held in the dungeons of IT, I would say, but it's definitely a discussion that needs to be held on the management team together with the boards of the directors to understand what is the risk level that we need to do. And we see that especially when I'm performing audits, I'm myself an ISO 27001 auditor. I see a lot of organizations that have artificial intelligence tools in place, but there is really a gap between the usage of AI and the oversight that we have in organizations. And it's really that gap in oversight that creates the risk. It's not per se the technology itself that's creating a risk, although there are definitely some cybersecurity risks in using artificial intelligence and not using it in a correct way. But it's definitely that gap in having that oversight on what artificial intelligence tools do we have in place in the organization that's posing quite a risk to the organization. So that means that we need to try to have a look at everything that's happening in the outside world, but also everything that's happening in the inside world. So we need to get it under control. But what does under control actually mean? And what is it that we want to talk about? And it's not under control, and that's very often the discussion that I have with very technical people. It's not understanding the black box per se. It's not really understanding the algorithm from A to Z. It's not really getting everything under control there. It's really understanding on who owns certain risks in the organization associated with risk management and with artificial intelligence. So it's really having that discussion in the organization on who owns certain tools, who owns the assets that are related to the use with that artificial intelligence, and who takes accountability around those risks and the mitigation of those risks. And we come back to what is the risk appetite that we really want to take in an organization, and what are the measures that we want to take into the organization. And not only measures from a technological point of view, but also looking at policies, procedures, having the right resources in the organization to ensure that everybody has a good understanding of what their role and responsibility is and what needs to be under control. So having establishing that ownership, that accountability is obviously important, but also, as I already stated, and know the risks that you're encountering with the use of certain artificial intelligence tools, and taking decisions that are really thought through. So not something because it's cool and sexy to use a certain artificial intelligence tool, but really have a thorough discussion with all stakeholders to understand what is the risk and what could go wrong if something would really go wrong. What would be the impact on the organization? With artificial intelligence, it's obviously, and depending on for what purpose you're using the AI, it's not only the impact on the organization and potentially the financial and reputational damage that you would have to the organization. But with a lot of artificial intelligence tools, we also need to have a look at risks to the human rights through transparency, to those to diversity, to equality, to all those kind of elements as well, and to really document the decisions. So taking a decision or accepting a risk is not per se wrong, but everybody around the table, and especially management, need to be aware of the consequences of taking certain risks and really having that decision documented, so you can always revert back to that documented decision. You want to also ensure that you have traceability from design all the way to deployment. Having a risk assessment and performing risk assessments throughout the whole life cycle of an AI tool is really important. PECB has a completely different training around the AI risk management, but that it's really key. It already starts at the beginning when you start thinking about your AI tool, whether you're developing it or you want to use it. It already starts from there. What is the scope that you want to deploy your AI tool, and what are the risks that you already know? What is the use case that you want to use the AI for, and what are the means and the purposes that the AI definitely is not intended to do? So getting those things really out there and to really understand what the impact is really important. And you don't do it once with the kickoff, you do it all the way through the whole life cycle until the deployment in the real life world, where you've done sufficient testing, where you also have a look at, okay, do we have model drift? Is there something happening with the data that we're using? Is everything still under control? And did we already, from the start in the design phase, did we already think about certain risks that might arise? Of course, in that whole life cycle, all the way from design to deployment, you also need to build in the ability to really stop the process and to really stop developing, stop deploying, and to really understand what is happening. So you need to be able, and that's where human oversight comes into play. You need to be able to stop certain AI behavior. You need to be able to change certain AI behavior, and definitely you need to be able to explain AI behavior. The transparency, the trust factor is very important when working with artificial intelligence. And when I talk with a lot of management teams, I always get the discussion, because I'm the lady from compliance, and I'm stating it very nicely now. I always get the feedback, yeah, but you're blocking innovation, you're blocking artificial intelligence, and we cannot move forward because you come up with a whole list of guidelines and rules that we need to adhere to. It's cumbersome, we don't want to do that. But it's control, it has nothing to do with blocking artificial intelligence. It's really about thinking before you act. It's basically what we tell our children as well. Think before you jump into the pool or in something, and think before you act. But it's also being able to answer questions with confidence and answering those hard questions. And what will go wrong? What are risks that we are accepting? And is it okay that we accept those risks, or should we take a completely different decision? So it's really being able to ask the hard questions, but also to answer those hard questions with confidence. Now, when we look at the AI reality in organizations, I already spoke about it. I think there's not a lot of organizations that tell me. I spoke to one client that didn't, and they made a very distinctive decision to not use artificial intelligence. But in many organizations, there is a lot of AI tools in the organization. I started the webinar with that statement, and we have basically shadow AI tools in business teams that are using it embedded, and even simple tools like Canva, where we used to make very creative things. We have embedded artificial intelligence in those tools. But we also see that AI is embedded in a lot of SaaS applications, a lot of suppliers provide it as well. And that means that there is a very decentralized approach to the use of artificial intelligence, where it's very difficult for compliance teams or even a security team to understand what are the different components that we're using and what are the tools that have embedded AI, what are standalone AI tools that we're using. So there's not really a central AI inventory. We don't have anything that's really understanding, okay, what does it do? What data is it processing? Is the data shared? Is it being used to train the model? Is it not? We don't really have that oversight, let alone that we know how that artificial intelligence is protected, how we make sure that any data that goes into the tool is really securely stored and so forth. So that also means that with that whole shadow artificial intelligence area in the organization, that also means that anything that's related with security, privacy, but also ethics is handled completely separately, because usually our privacy sits with the DPO, has a separate department, or they sit in the compliance team. The same goes for the CISO. They're really looking into the hardcore IT stuff and information security stuff, and the AI tools kind of slip through the mazes of the net in really understanding, okay, how is that managed? So that also means that there is no central visibility. We're not really aware of all the risks, privacy risks, ethical risks, security risks that are actually coming towards those organizations. So when you are listening to me, and take a little step back and think for yourself, how is that in my organization? How are we handling that? It's probably something that is pretty normal, and that's kind of the same way in your organization, and it's pretty fine, and we're very early in the early stages of the adoption of artificial intelligence. But having these kind of things unmanaged brings certain risks to the organization, and that's what we need to be aware of. So that also means that when I talk to a lot of people, and most people focus on the technical risks that we see with artificial intelligence. It's not secure, and those things are not working. We don't understand the algorithm, and yes, those are risks that are in place, but that's not the most important risk. The most important risk is that structural risk, that we don't have that overall view of what AI tools are used and how things are handled, and how we do, for example, risk assessments. What are mitigations that need to be put in place in the organizations? And that also means that that is basically the first step that we need to take. A lot of organizations nowadays, and it's only growing with those new regulations like NIS2, we see that a lot of organizations have already a lot of existing controls in place. And I'm not trying to state here, and that's not the message that I want to bring, is that whatever you already have in place is not working. It is working, but it's not sufficient. So when we look at information on ISO 27001, it looks at information security. It really looks at control measures that you need to implement. It focuses on information, but it's not really having those controls in place, having that risk assessment specifically for information security. It's already a good start, but it doesn't help you in taking those decisions specifically for artificial intelligence. it's not really designed to govern those typical high-level strategic decisions. When doing risk assessments or risk management from out of an ISO 27001 perspective, we really look at information, data security, sometimes even cyber security, although it's not the main purpose, but it doesn't look at all the other elements which are relevant from an artificial intelligence point of view. Again, ethics, human rights, privacy components, context components that you need to take into account. That's ISO 27001 is not created for that kind of risk management. And in ISO 27001, although everybody who's currently working in the area of information security or cybersecurity knows that the human factor is very important. But in artificial intelligence, the impact on human lives, on human rights is often ignored in the standard ISO 27001 approach, but also bias. The fact that data can be biased, that AI can be biased, that people can be biased is often ignored in the way that we've set up ISO 27001. And then, of course, we also have model behavior. Your artificial intelligence model is going to change over time because data gets polluted, data sets change, the context in which you're deploying your AI changes. So there's a multitude of reasons why model behavior can change. But at this moment, through existing controls, that model behavior is not really governed. So that also means that all these risks that I've highlighted here actually fall through the cracks in all the existing systems that we already have in place in the organization. So, and this is where ISO 42001 really comes into play. I was planning on creating like a very nice pop-up where it said ISO 42001, but that's really the part where ISO 42001 bridges the gap between the new reality that we're currently working in and all the effort that we've already put in existing management systems and in existing controls, and we don't need to throw it away. We just need to adapt it to the reality that we're currently working on. So when we look at ISO 42001, and I summarized it here a little bit as like it's kind of an ISMS, but it's ISMS thinking applied to artificial intelligence. That's obviously not completely 100% true, but it gives you, it works in the same way. So people that are already used to working with an ISO 27001 find it really easy to adopt their way of thinking to the 42001. So ISO 42001 is actually the first international AI management system standard that has been developed. I always explain this, and when I'm teaching ISO 42001 as well, I'm not sure which came first, the ISO 42001 or the EU AI Act, because they look very, very similar. Perhaps the same people were involved in the creation, but the ISO 42001 is that first international standard, and it really focuses on understanding the risks that are associated with the use, the development, the deployment of artificial intelligence, and it focuses on accountability and in governance. How do you need to set up a management system, a structure in the organization that allows you to really identify the risks, to mitigate the risks, but also to assign accountability throughout the organization and ensuring that everybody is aware of those risks and also understand what are the actions that you need to undertake, what are the things that you need to document to ensure that you can show to customers, but also to regulators and other stakeholders that you've done your due diligence, that you did your thorough thinking, that you were prepared for those difficult questions. The ISO 42001 also covers the full AI lifecycle. And remember when I spoke a couple of slides ago about it's really starting from the design to the deployment of the AI tool and even further throughout the decommissioning of the AI tool. So it's really, in the old ages, we spoke about from cradle to grave. It's kind of the same thing with the AI lifecycle. So it's really looking at design phase, the ideation phase, what are the context that we think about where an AI system needs to be deployed, what are certain risks associated with that, where is the AI system definitely not going to work into, and what would be risks if an AI tool would be used in a different way that we were thinking about. What would risks be that? So it's always already a little bit of forward thinking and thinking what could go wrong. And it's really having that same thinking hat on in moving forward throughout the whole life cycle, all the way to when you're deploying it in real life. When you see that there is model shift, when model behavior changes, in understanding how things could go wrong. Strong thing of ISO 42001 is that it's actually designed to work with existing management systems, because there is a very huge overlap. Most of you are probably aware that all ISO standards are created equal, so that means that clauses 4 to 10 are the same and they have the same high-level structure in all the ISO standards. So that means that the work that you've done to understand the context of the organization, the work that you've done to detail risk management processes, to do the performance measurements, improvement of conformities, all those things work in the same way in the ISO 42001. So it's not a whole different beast. So you can use the same thing over and over again. So you can nicely build upon it. It's kind of created like Lego blocks. So you can build upon your existing system, which makes it really nice. As I already stated, it shares both ISO 27001 and 42001 have the same high-level structure, but their annex, and we have in 27001 your Annex A, the annex of 42001 is very similar. So there's an easy, and I've done a webinar a couple of months ago together with Graham, where we really highlighted, it might be useful to look it up on the PCB channel, to really see where can we map existing Annex A controls of the ISO 27001 to annexes of the ISO 42000. And so to ensure that you can really link those two together and you can even build a stronger management system. ISO 27001 focuses on protecting the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. So really the information security, where ISO 42001 governs AI behavior across the full life cycle, as I already explained, all the way from design to decommissioning. So it looks really, it has separate controls in place to really look at those different phases throughout that whole AI life cycle. But they both put a very, very strong emphasis on risk management, leadership, and continual improvement. So having already that ISO 27001 management system in place will already give you that culture within the organization of continual improvement and looking at risks as not something negative, but something that you need to have a detailed look at and that you need to assign mitigation actions and accountability. When you combine both of them, if you combine them in a marriage, they ensure that comprehensive management of both data and artificial intelligence risk. They seamlessly work together, they go hand in hand, and they really help you moving forward in getting that due diligence, getting that compliance towards the use of artificial intelligence. So what I try to do is that I try to combine control areas to give you a little bit more oversight, where you can also see where there is a good overlap with the ISO 27001. So where you see control area 1 is really focusing on governance and leadership. So it really focuses on where, and this is where a lot of organizations stumble, where it goes wrong. They just leave it out there. Everybody is allowed in the organization to decide what they want to do, and that's where it goes wrong. So AI governance without leadership involvement, without the backup and support of leadership, is destined to go wrong. It's the same thing as in ISO 27001. That's something that I always tell to my customers. If we don't have the backup and the support of management, we're not deploying an ISO 27001. You cannot put governance in place if you don't have the backing of leadership. So it really needs to, and your ISO 42001 really forces that clarity. Who is the artificial intelligence owner? Who approves risks? Who's responsible for escalating issues? Who's responsible for the treatment actions? If you don't have that in place, everything is just showcasing, is just having a nice external picture ready. If you don't have this in place, all the rest of your management system will really fall in like a card house that doesn't really have a foundation. So that governance and leadership area is really talking about having the roles in place, having AI owners, having risk owners, but also creating an AI policy and AI objectives. AI objectives really go hand in hand with the overall business strategy that an organization has. If you have an organization, and let's take the example of a bank, if the culture or the mission and vision values of the bank is, and we want to be very close to our end customers, and we value the personal contact and those kind of things, it would be very strange if you would have an AI objective that would replace all your agents in banks that have that human interface. So you really need to think about, does it make sense to take certain decisions? Does it fit with the organization? So really having that sit down with management around the table and having that discussion, like, does it really make sense? And is it in line with what we stand for as a company? So having that leadership there is very important. Having, of course, board level oversight together with the involvement of leadership is obviously important. They're your most important champions. Board is are your cheerleaders, and they need to make sure that you get the resources to ensure that you have everything in place to ensure that risk management governance can be rolled out. And of course, there needs to be transparency in decision making. So setting this as the foundation of your house is critical, is crucial. Without this, I would say that it's not even making sense to move on to other control areas, because this is the first step that you need to take, the first big jump that you need to take. The second control area really focuses on AI risk management, and it uses the same logic as we do in ISO 27001. It only has a broader impact. So first of all, the first step that you need to do when you look at AI risk management, we need to think about what are the different use cases with the tool that we're developing, deploying in the organization, but also in the outside world. Especially when you're developing an AI tool, you need to think about that. And you also need to think about what are the different models that we can use. Where I said that the same logic applies for that, like in the ISO 27001, where we look for ISO 27001 on the CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. A risk management in artificial intelligence is much more broad. So we also look at impact on people, on society, on business, but also we look at explainability, fairness, possible misuse. So you need to take all these things into account to ensure that you have a full 360 view on those different use cases. So that also means that it's probably not one risk assessment, but if you have like 5 use cases, you will probably need to do 5 times a risk assessment to understand for each use case, what is the impact on people, society, business? Can we still explain? Do we still have that transparency? So really having that AI risk management in place and looking at all the components is really important. You also need to consider, when performing that AI risk management, you also need to consider bias, misuse, but also model drift and over-reliance on AI. I'm not sure if everybody remembers, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, but Cloudflare went down for like a couple of hours, and all of a sudden, a lot of people were panicking because they couldn't access ChatGPT anymore. So, and it seemed like nobody was capable of thinking for for themselves. They couldn't come up with things anymore, and that's actually really sad that we need to have ChatGPT or any other AI tool to help us to do our work. And the goal of AI is improving our way of life. It's the goal is not making us dumber, and that's if we're not careful, that's the way that we're going to. And of course, when you have put everything into consideration, you also need to document your decisions. You need to document when you want to mitigate certain risks, what are your treatment plans that you're going to implement, but you obviously also need to document where you accept the risks and what your reasoning behind that acceptance is, and what potential consequences could be on the long run, and what other actions that you could be undertaking. So that is something that you need to take into account. So as you see, it's really simple, or it's similar to the ISO 27001. It's not definitely not simple. I really encourage you to, if you're very deep into the deployment and the use of artificial intelligence, to take that 4-day course. But it's quite an exercise that you need to go through to really understand what are the risks and what are the things that we need to think about. It's not a theoretical exercise. You also need to involve your technical people, your data scientists, to really understand what are things that can go wrong within the model and within the AI system that we're using. Of course, AI is really dependent on the data that is being used. If you have crappy data, the output of the AI will also be crappy. That's kind of it will only have a little bit more glitter on it. But we need to think, and that's what the control area 3 is about, on what can go wrong with the data and the model. You need to think about where is the data coming from, and what's the data provenance, where is it coming from? Did we buy it somewhere? Is it clean data? How is the data set put together? Are we sure that the data set itself will not lead to bias? What is the quality of the data that we're using? Is the context, or will the context over time change or not? And do we need to take that into account? Of course, once you set up your AI system, you need to validate your model. It's not something that you put together, you have an algorithm, you push data through it, and all of a sudden it works and you can put it out in the market. That's not how it works. You need to test it very diligently. So it's really about life cycle thinking here. You set it up, but over time things change, data set change, context change. So that is something that you need to take into account. So it's not only about building your AI model and building your AI system, it's also really monitoring your AI system, looking at, for example, performance. Is your AI system still giving the same type of answers, or is there anything that's deviating? Are things happening that is ensuring that answers aren't correct anymore? Is the AI giving strange answers? You also need to think about drift. So you need to put something like change management in place for your model, so that you can step in. I remember what we spoke about a few minutes ago. You need to be able to step in and to change the AI behavior. So you need to think about how do you want to pick that up. Where we see at a lot of incidents that happen, it's usually not something that breaks all of the sudden, and that's why the sentence is there. It's something that goes wrong. It's like boiling a lobster, basically. You boil it while it's living, and the lobster doesn't really understand that it's being boiled. It's kind of the same thing with artificial intelligence, where at a very slow pace and changes, it's really slow failures that no one notices until it's really too late. And that's something that you really need to make sure that doesn't happen. And you do that by monitoring the performance, by having human oversight, by having change management in place in your organization to manage that performance of your AI system. The fourth control area talks about human oversight. It's a very important element in the EU AI Act as well, where you having artificial intelligence in an organization doesn't move responsibility, it just shifts the responsibility. Where we see now, and we see it with the outage of Cloudflare, where people really stressed that they couldn't access ChatGPT. I see it with my daughter, who's using ChatGPT and other AI tools while studying. We really trust on those automated outputs too much. So the ISO 42001 really pushes you and really requires you to have that human in the loop, to really have human checkpoints, to ensure that the output of the AI is still correct, but also having training in place for both users, but also decision makers. So you have different set of trainings, so basically for the users, how do you interpret the output of the AI system, but also for admins on how can you change things and what do you need to look at performance and those kind of things. But also having clear escalation paths in place in ensuring that when something goes wrong in the model performance, that you can escalate to a human being to step in where necessary. And of course, that human oversight will also help you in avoiding that automation bias, because it will always lead to certain forms of bias if it's the data provenance is not correct. So when having that human in the loop, you avoid that automation bias. Then control area 5 is really where ISO 27001 takes the center stage again, and where it really steps in again, because control area 5 really looks at security and resilience. So it looks at AI systems can be attacked in old ways where we have ISO 27001, but of course there are also new ways in attacking AI systems. So think about prompt injection, poison data that leads to bias, model extraction, where competitors try to do negative things with your model. So you need to make sure that you have a good oversight, and where artificial intelligence really becomes part of that attack surface. So you really need to take that into account. As I said, you have a prompt injection, you have model theft, you have data poisoning, all those things. There's a lot of manipulation of risks that can happen. So really important, like with any other software tool that you would start developing, but with AI, it's even more important that you have secure development and secure deployment controls in place. Coming hand in hand is, of course, also the monitoring, logging, and any anomaly detection that you can have. Again, something where ISO 27001 comes into play as well, but really looking at, okay, how can we become aware with alerting that something is wrong. And of course, like we're used to in ISO 27001, having an incident response and incident recovery process in place that is directed towards those AI systems. Because more and more, and even when we take a peek look or a sneak peek into 2, 3, 5 years from now, AI will even be more embedded in organizations. We will be more dependent on artificial intelligence, also in healthcare, also in OT security, where we really need to have an incident response plan in place and a recovery. Of course, hand in hand with that goes the testing of that incident response and incident recovery to ensure that if something goes wrong, that we at least know how to react and that we can resume business operations as normal as quickly as possible. So when looking at that ISO 27001, ISO 42001, we need to think about, like, why is certification now so important? Well, certification, first of all, shouldn't be a goal in itself. You really need to think about why do we want to do the certification, but I already see in a lot of tenders, a lot of security questionnaires that are related to NIS2 compliance, DORA compliance, anything else, EU AI Act compliance, that there are a lot of questions that are being asked about risk management, where is your data coming from? So when you have a standard in place like the 42001, it will help you in getting that consistent approach. and consistent answers, and not going into the defense, but really answering consistently. Certification is obviously also an external validation. As somebody from outside your organization that's kind of independent, although you still pay him, so it's not totally independent, but an auditor is kind of independent, and they check if your governance is in place and if it's actually working. So it's really it gives a signal of maturity in, like, you know what you're doing, and you have a system in place. A certification is definitely not asking perfection. For the ones on amongst you that are working with an ISO 27001, you definitely know 100% secure doesn't exist, so perfection doesn't exist, but it reduces also the fact that you depend on a couple of key people in the organization that knows how things go. So that certification brings that structured controls, but it also gives you that trust to customers and regulators. It also brings that internal clarity on, like, what is the flow that we need to use, what are the things that we need to put in place to really speed up our process. Compliance get really irritated if you try to cut corners and don't want to go through the whole process that you need to go through. But if you know what the process is and you are able to involve compliance throughout the whole management system from the early beginning, it helps creating that clarity. And of course, it avoids that you have that panic every time you get a questionnaire and that 10 people need to be pulled out of operation to answer to that questionnaire. So it really helps you with avoiding that panic towards that. Now, how do you get started? First of all, stay calm is the first thing that I want to say here. But of course, you first want to map what are the AI use cases in my organization. Where are we using AI? Where are we developing AI if you're in a development company? And what are our suppliers of those AI systems? And you first of all want to know what is the playing field that you're working with and what's in place. Then you want to build upon your existing ISO 27001 process. You already have a lot of things in place if you have an ISO 27001 certificate, or if you have a management system even without a certification. You just need to build upon that. And then when you start, you don't start by browsing the internet and looking for GRC tools or any other compliance tools that are out there. You start with governance. You don't look for very fancy tools. You start with governance, you start with the thinking process, and you start with the good old-fashioned pen and paper. Keyboard and words is also fine, but you start with governance. And then you start building your internal competence throughout training, because artificial intelligence is a very new field. Looking at the amount of people that are actually qualified in the field of artificial intelligence, like data scientists, like experts in algorithms and those kind of things, there are not thousands of them out there. So that means that a lot of people in the organization get promoted into artificial intelligence where they're actually having an IT background, for example. So they need to build that competence both around how do we handle artificial intelligence, but also around the governance, around the whole ISO 42001 and potentially the ISO 27001 processes as well. So really start building on those internal competences as well, and providing you with a roadmap and building in a steady pace. You don't want to boil the ocean, so you want to do it step by step. So if you start with leveling the playing field, building upon what you already have, and start building your competences, you already have a good starting point to move forward. So that brings me basically at my last slide. So what are the key things that I would love for you to remember? AI control is mainly a governance challenge, and that's where it all starts. So that's something that you need to tackle first, and throughout that governance challenge, you will also tackle any other technical challenges that come along with that. Having an ISO 27001 is already very good, is also necessary, especially because AI is increasing that attack surface and you really want to have that as a basis in place. but it's not sufficient. It doesn't look at it doesn't look at all the components that you need to do a proper governance of your AI systems. And that's where ISO 42001 really closes the gap, where it builds upon the basis that you already have from ISO 27001, like risk management, like leadership, like continual improvement, but it adds those additional controls that you can use throughout the full life cycle, starting from ideation to decommissioning of your AI system, where you really need to have that additional add-on. Certification, it's not the end goal of everything, obviously, but it does support your credibility. It shows the maturity that you take towards your customers, towards your stakeholders. So it really can help you to get that maturity level inside the outside world. So I look at Yetmir, well, I look digitally at Yetmir. If there are any questions or if there's anything that there's to be added.
There have been plenty of questions that the audience have asked us. I'll start with the first one. From a risk management perspective, what are the top ethical and security risks when building an AI companion for venting? And how do ISO IEC 42001 and 27001 help address them from day one?
Yeah, so the ISO 42001 doesn't really give, it gives you the overview of how you should perform risk management, like it's with 27001. ISO doesn't prescribe you, these are the risks that you need to think about. A good resource that you can use is the MIT database. So MIT has a database, and it's a living database, where you can find over 1,000 AI risks, and they're categorized into security level, ethics, human risks, even are there deliberate risks or indeliberate risks, and there you can find a very nice starting point to really have a look at what is the model and the use case that you're looking at. And you can build upon those risk scenarios that you have there, and then you need to come up with a risk management methodology where you look at likelihood, impact, and those kind of things, like we're used to it, and then you will already get a long way.
Thank you. Another question asks how to control AI use for remote users or those using their own devices, BYOD, or even using browsers that have built-in AI.
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Bring your own device, browsing, always very difficult to really block them, unless you really ask employees or contractors to really enroll their device in your endpoint management, like in a MOM or an MDM solution. I know there are currently tools out there that help you track the use of different AI tools, and that even can show you what is the type of data that employees have put into the data in the AI systems that are out there. So that's one thing. That's of course for the devices that you have in your endpoint security. For the ones that are in the browser, there's not a lot of things that you can do without being very restrictive. Again, there it's obviously working on awareness, creating an AI use policy, both for your internal people, but also for your suppliers and contractors. But just having that AI policy or that AI use policy is obviously not enough. It's the same thing like we've went through with information security. How do you recognize a phishing mail? What is something that you shouldn't be doing? It's kind of the same thing with artificial intelligence. So it's really bringing that message time and time again, and to really understand, not from an ivory tower perspective and I forbid you to do something, but really understanding why people want to use artificial intelligence, and give them reasoning. Okay, this is the playing field, this is the box where you're allowed to be to play in, And these are the rules that you need to adhere to. But it's not something that you do once, it's a consistent exercise.
Thank you. And we've had a couple of requests for you, Nathalie, to repeat the reference for the AI risk database. It seems like some have missed it.
Yeah, it's the MIT AI risk repository. So if you type in Google MIT AI risk, you will probably get into onto the right web page. It's an Excel spreadsheet that you can download, and then you can play around with it. But it changes not on a weekly basis, but it changes pretty frequently. But it's a really nice resource to use. What I'll do, Yasmir, is I'll provide you with the link, and then perhaps you can put it in the notes as well when you put the thing online. Yes, absolutely. And we'll continue for now with another question. In terms of AI lifecycle, as outlined in ISO 42001, does the board oversight responsibility not about decision making regarding the use of AI even before design issues are considered? Yes, of course. You need to have the discussion, as I stated at one customer of mine, that the board just decided we're not doing the AI thing. So it's a decision even before the ideation phase. Is AI something that we want to do? If your organization really builds upon the relationship with people, in having a warm contact and those kind of things, yeah, AI is probably not the way to go. That being said, there are still use cases where you still can use artificial intelligence to increase efficiency of your workforce, of course. But the decision if AI is allowed in the organization in whatever form you're planning to use it, even if it's in a tool, it's definitely a decision of the board. It's also the AI use policy. Again, it's not something that a compliance officer or a CISO needs to create in his or her basement, but it's something that needs to be discussed with management, with the board, to understand what the implications are, because those are the guys and girls that need to align with that as well. And you don't want to have an AI use policy that tells you, for example, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT. I'm just saying something. And then your CEO is the first one, if they want to answer a question, that first checks with ChatGPT what the algorithm is saying. It works in the same way. Leaders they're put on a pedestal. Everything what they do is being enlarged, and that means that everything what they do well is enlarged. But unfortunately, everything they do wrong is also being copied by employees in your organization. Thank you. We'll take a few more questions, or maybe just one more. One asks, OpenAI is not ISO 42001 certified. Do you have any idea why not? And if they are not, why should any other company be certified with ISO 42001? Good question. I don't know why they're not certified. It's always a difficult discussion on why you should be certified. I do think, and my first point of view is certification shouldn't be a goal in itself. I'm very allergic to organizations that call me and say, for example, oh, I want to have a 27001 certificate. And if I ask why, the answer is because everybody else does it, or a tender asks me to have it. While it is usually part of the equation, it shouldn't be the only part of it. So it's really for me, certification is taking yourself seriously and really taking the step away from being a cowboy in the Wild West. It's really, we take our responsibility, especially with artificial intelligence, we take it seriously. As an organization, as management, you're responsible for the livelihood of all the people that work for you. For me, that's something really important. And for me, that's also where certification as one part comes into play, together with not being fraudulent and those kind of things. But it's really putting your money where your mouth is and really saying, okay, yes, we take it seriously, and I want to put resources, budget against it, and I want to showcase to the world that we are a mature company and that we take it seriously. On top of that, there will become a time like we now see, for example, with NIS2, ISO 27001 is not something that is mandatory from any laws or regulation. But for example, in Belgium, NIS2 or the NIS2 law in Belgium tells you that to show you adherence to or compliance towards the NIS2, you need to be certified towards ISO 27001 or a national framework that has been developed in Belgium. So it might move into the same direction. So why would you wait until the moment in time comes, until a regulator tells you you have to? Why not step up and take your responsibility seriously?
Thank you, Nathalie. Now, before we wrap up today, I'd like to just say a few words about our platform, PCB Skills. PCB Skills is an on-demand learning platform created to help professionals like you stay ahead with flexible, bite-sized training capsules. Now, whether you're building expertise in cybersecurity, ISO standards, data privacy, or leadership, PCB gives you access to more than 3,000 courses anytime and anywhere. The platform is designed for practical learning with short and focused modules that fit into your busy schedule, and you can start learning immediately, track your progress, even earn CPD points and attestations, and even get certified. Now, if today's webinar inspired you to deepen your knowledge, I highly recommend you exploring PCB Skills. And if you are interested, please reach out to marketing.skills@pcb.com to book a meeting and explore the catalog. No extra fees after registration, just one subscription and gain full access. So I'll put this on the chat. If you are interested, feel free to explore or even contact us. And the last reminder, the recording of this webinar, along with the presentation slides, will be available on our website and YouTube channel, and an attestation of webinar completion worth 1 CPD credit will be issued within a week to all participants who attended at least 60% of this live session. Thank you very much for your time and engagement today, and a very special thank to you, Nathalie, for delivering such an insightful session. We hope to see you at our upcoming webinars as well. Take care and see you soon.